Hi, this is Scott Macbeth, president of Comic Excitement. I'm happy to be here on an interview with Rich Terdoslavich, an artist. Rich specializes in several areas: comic art, storyboards, illustrations, murals, custom sneakers, and music. And I will turn it over to Rich at this time and let him go into more detail, starting off with sort of how he got to where he is, and then we'll go into what he's doing now, what he could do for you, where he's headed, and how you can contact him. Rich?
Hey everyone, hi. So yeah, my name is Rich Terdoslavich. Some people call me Rich T, like a nickname. Born and raised in New York City, and I'm actually, I guess not calling, but I'm here in New York City. And I am an artist, illustrator, musician. I work in the field of comic books, comic art, sequential art, illustrations, also digital illustrations, storyboards for film and other projects, murals, customized sneakers, and I do music as well. I'm a guitarist, songwriter. I've done music for film and theater for some other clients such as Merlion Films and so forth. And at the moment, I'm just working on a slew of projects, putting a reel together for the music licensing and trying to get more work in TV and film. And at the moment, just doing a lot of commission work of clients. Met a lot of fans through being at Comic Cons where people will like have a piece of original artwork of superheroes, et cetera, and so forth. So I'm in the middle of doing that. It's been very consistent and so forth. And moving forward, a lot of it is just still networking, still hustling for the gigs and so forth, and as well, and just doing my own slew of original artwork, original projects. That's tinkering away, work in progress, and so forth. And if you're interested, you could follow me on Instagram at ACEMOD1. That's ACEMOD1. I am on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter as well at ModSoul at MODSOUL. And I am always interested and available for any upcoming projects, whether you're a publisher or you're a filmmaker or you're a client, private client, you want to have a piece of commission, or you publish or anything of that nature. I am always available for hire, and looking forward to hearing from you soon.
Hey, Rich, for folks out there, how did you sort of get to where you are, in terms of your background and things that you've done?
I think in terms of like the career stuff, I think it was just a lot of it was just a whole, like just navigating through so many areas and places. Sometimes it just happened by accident, as opposed to just making a bunch of like cold calling clients and getting rejections and so forth, or hitting the convention circuit and putting your portfolio together and meeting with editors and so forth. And it's just, I think it's just always like a continuous flow. You just never really stop. I don't know if there's a really defined answer, but starting out, having grown up in New York City, I was always drawing since I was a kid.
Okay, okay. That's what I hear from a lot of artists. It's like,
yeah,
it just like, boom, they were like doing this like from a very young age. And I always notice that the artists, like a lot of artists I see, they're always drawing. I mean,
yeah,
if they're not talking to you, they're drawing.
yeah, yeah. And I was like,
education, or was it self-taught?
I got education. I mean, I started drawing when I was an early age. I mean, I was, drawing as a kid and so forth. And I was like 12 years old. I got published in Newsday. It was called Kids Day. Wow. I remember doing it for Columbus Day in the 6th grade. And I was talking to a buddy of mine, and I think I was, we're about to head into high school. And I was like, well, I mentioned about like doing art. And he said, well, I had my sister goes to the High School of Art and Design in New York City.
Oh.
And I applied there, and I got in, and wanted to go in for comics. Wanted to be a major in illustration because I had a conflict with taking a comic book class with writing, creative writing, which I also was doing as well in high school. And then from there, I went to Bard College, a liberal arts school upstate New York. Got a degree in the fine arts. Came back and just started hitting, pounding the pavement. And as I mentioned before, like probably falling on my face 1,000 times and learning from my mistakes, but just try to keep at it and so forth.
What kept you motivated?
So many things. I mean, I'll say for one thing off the top. Well, first of all, I would say that I was very blessed or lucky to have a family growing up in terms of just having that support, that foundation. My mother, we lived in Queens. So the fact if, let's say my mom, she worked late at night, coming home with like a ream of white paper to draw, that was just like at 10 years old or 11 years old, you just don't realize how great that is and so forth. It was like a really good, or my dad bringing home a ream of white paper, just like regular copy paper, and just making your own comics at 11 and trying to
Right.
throw. And that's how you started. But the other one I would have to say is my girlfriend, Kim, that I lived with. We're going on for 25 years, and she was very encouraging and very supportive. Just coming across, saying, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? Knowing that even when I was doing comics, she would say, your work's really great. Why don't you try to like go into this field or go into that? And funny enough about customized sneakers, one of the jobs I worked in was I also was teaching for many years. So I was a visual arts instructor for the Harlem Children's Zone. And I walked in one day and my supervisor says, listen, we're going to do this cool thing with the kids. We're going to do customized sneakers. And I think you're going to really like it. And that's how I got into it. I was also an artist in residence at the County Colon Community Center. And you just wind up doing a mural project with them, or just all these things would snowball. And so what keeps me motivated is like, besides drawing every day, it's like, it's hard to really pinpoint one exact answer. It just seems like a very continuous flow, but you just got to sort of tap into it and just stay at it, I think.
So you kind of started with did you start like with an interest in comics, and then that grew? Is that kind of correct? Into other areas?
Yeah, I would say, I get a feeling like when I was a kid at an early age, I'm looking back growing up, it had to be the cartoons, because you're looking at a visual imagery, right? And you're sort of attracted to it. And I think there must have been some comic books floating around, but I remember.
So TV cartoons?
I would say probably both, because you talk about it's a visual imagery, right?
Right.
That's something off the top of my head, but I do remember as a kid, really at an early age, some of the first books I had there was a reprint of Fantastic Four.
Okay.
It was a Jack Kirby cover. And I still remember the splash page where it was an android. It was like right in the foreground, and Mr. Fantastic, his hand like reaching out. It was a beautiful perspective shot that Jack Kirby did. It was really incredible. He had these incredible splash pages. But I also remember as a kid, we were out in Long Island, on Shirley, Long Island, and it was my brother, two of my cousins, and myself, and there was a 7-Eleven, and I think mom and dad just were like, hey, why don't you guys buy some comics? And I remember picking up Marvel Triple Action. It was another Kirby cover, and Captain America and the Scarlet Witch. And I remember my other cousin was into Kung Fu. He picked up a Kung Fu book that Charlton Comics put out. And my other cousin picked an Archie, and my brother picked out a Sergeant Rock book. It was an incredible Joe Kubert cover with Sergeant Rock battling this was like a huge German soldier. And there were like soldiers, American GIs on crucifixes in the background. It was a very intense cover at an early sort of see that, yeah. And I think that when they were not looking, I took all those books, brought them home. But I was like hooked. I was just like really, really hooked as a kid, So.
Well, the fact that you remember all that so vividly is, kind of indicates how important it was to you. And so when did you start you mentioned a little bit about growing into other areas beyond like comics. Was that as you went through, did that occur while you were in high school, college? After that, you mentioned your girlfriend. How did, what was sort of the road of the branching out into the different
Well,
areas?
I would say it was just a lot. I don't know if I should say this, but a lot of it was just really naive. I can't pronounce the word, maybe being sort of naive, I think, or naivete, in terms of there was really no plan. I just should have just kept moving along. I don't know if I should get into details, but it was just kind of like, well, I guess we'll try this, we'll do that.
Right.
And just something would fall into place, or something didn't fall into place. I think I just remember in the early days, like just putting a portfolio, meeting with a client, and it was just sort of like a shot in the dark to see like what would click or what would work. But at other times, I think there was a time where it was sort of like a fallow period, and I remember sort of like kind of getting lost in, kind of lost in my way. I just kind of like fell off the path a little bit. And I remember when I met Kim, kind of slowly getting back into it. And then one time I was just I was doing a music gig downtown in New York City, Lower East Side, and if my friend was there, he brought another friend, or it was a friend of a friend. He says, "Well, I'm an editor for a publishing company, and we are looking for illustrators, cartoonists." The next thing you know, I was doing 4 books got published. So there was just stuff like that did happen. Like I said, like I talked about before, where it was just, I would do the comic convention circuit, have a portfolio, put some samples together, do a pitch, and got business cards, and it was great. It said, "We like your work, et cetera, keep in touch." And you were really psyched about it. And then lo and behold, you come home and you get a phone call, and someone says, "Hi, are you Rich Terdoslavich?" I said, "Yes." I said, "Well, you left your portfolio in the cab. I have it. You can come pick it up." And then get a next phone call, and it was a husband, a woman that was in the cab, and she found it, showed it to her husband, says, "You got to look at this work." And he gets me a call, and he said, "You live in Hell's Kitchen, right?" I said, "Yeah." So my office is 4 blocks. Why don't you come by my office? You could pick up your portfolio. And then, it was Jeff Madoff of Madoff Productions, and he said, "I'm putting a film graphic novel project together. Could you read this? Read the script. Tell me what you think." And I wound up doing pages for him and sequential illustration work for a pitch. He was pitching the idea. We did an animatic film at the Alvin Ailey Theater. He got actors like John Doman and Matt Balmer to do a reading. And, I would get these other calls when I'm on another job and say, "Hey, look, I'm doing a presentation. I got to do a pitch for Victoria's Secret. Come by the office. I like to do some storyboards." Or there was another project with Charles Ardai, who's a book publisher of hard crime books. He says, "I'm working on a film project with him, some of his short stories. Could you do a series of illustrations for him?" And he was a really great guy to work with, and I hope to work with him in the near future. It was really a lot of fun jobs to work with.
You mentioned a comic convention. I've gone to San Diego Comic Con for a couple of decades. I put on a convention. I found San Diego Comic Con to be like that was my vacation for the year. I mean, it was just a fantastic experience for me personally as a fan, and kind of got me interested in getting deeper into everything. What do you? I mean, it looked like you've been to quite a few conventions. What do you get out of? I mean, what do you generally get out of it? How do you see that as a sort of what's the value added to you of the conventions?
Well, the first thing I'll probably say, I'll be kind of curious what's going to happen post-COVID. I'll tell you that right now. I don't know what's going to happen with that. But regarding the conventions themselves, 2 things. When I was a kid, it was just, that's another thing. I remember it was a friend of mine lived around the corner in Jackson Heights, Queens. Says, "I'm going to a comic convention. Why don't you tag along?" And didn't know idea what a convention was. And I was like 13. It was a bunch of us rode the New York City subway train, went into the Roosevelt Hotel, and I just could not believe it. I was like, he was like, the old saying, the kid locked in a candy store. It was just like, oh my God. It was just unbelievable. So the next time I was there, I saved up so much of my Christmas money in cash. I was just like, gonna go out and buy a bunch of comic books. And I remember the first convention I went to, the artist John Byrne was there, and his table was so filled with kids, because he was at that time, I mean, still is, but at that time he was like fantastic for the X-Men and was the hottest artist. And I remember there was Charles Vess was there, and he was drawing, and I was like, oh my God, it's a comic book artist. It was like, wow, this is incredible. And I remember slowly going to the table, watching him draw, and I was just like, I can't believe this exists, that this is actually a reality, that this could be, But as an adult, getting back into conventions, at first I would just go and buy, but the next thing, slowly I was getting the portfolio back together. And at one convention, I met Jim Steranko.
Wow,
and,
cool.
and I became really good friends with him. And I became good friends with him because I won't get into the whole details, but he asked this question: "Can anyone name me 3 seminal guitar players?" And I said, "That's very easy. That's Paul Burleson, Mickey Baker, and Scotty Moore." And he was blown away. He could not believe anyone knew that. I'm gonna give you a short version of the story. The long version is really incredible. I'll tell you another day. And I remember I said, Mr. Starenko, could you take a quick look at my portfolio? I didn't know Jim. He looked at it, and I thought, well, what's the worst could happen? He's, that is just, give it up, kid. But he was so awesome. He was so great. He was like, you know what? You have too many close-ups in a page. 1 or 2 should be good. Don't put too many close-ups on a page. Vary your English. That's the first lesson he gave me. And I said, hey, thank you so much. And so, hey, we're going to talk again. And we became good friends for the past over 20 years. It was just, I mean, but again, it was just one of those, I just didn't ever expect it to happen.
Right.
And it was just like going out to dinner with him, and it would be like Carmine Infantino or like Allred, or just, and just, we would just hang out and talk, or Basil Gogos, and you would just hang out and talk to these people. And it was just like, I always tell people, like, I didn't have to like spend $900 for tuition. I was just sitting right next to these great guys and just them and just learning the nuts and bolts of the trade. And Jim would just, sometimes you call Jim, and, my darling Clementine would be on TV. And it's okay. Now you see the shot over, and he was like, he's in PA, I'm in New York. And the TV's like, okay, this shot over here. Now, if you look at this shot over here, it's a 2-shot, and this is what's happening. This is what's going down. And it was just like, you can't believe it. He was just like talking to you. And it was like, he was just giving you all this information. And I remember even Carmine Infantino, I showed him my work, and he looked at me and he says, just remember, a long shot, a medium shot, and a close-up on each page. And he showed me how to take the background, do like no background, just have like a white background, just take all the details out. He said, it jars the eye. And it was just like those little tidbits that just kind of helped you along the way. And he got me, especially Jim, talking to him really got me into like film, like really, really studying film.
Right. He's into that whole film.
Oh, he's just, you could sort of see that illustration, comics, film, and graphic design and music all seeps into his music. Seeps into the art. And he was showing me, explaining to me the nuts and bolts of a lot of the pages, how he told the story visually and so forth. And I still have, like, he did a lecture once, 2008 or 2007. I still have a bunch of his notes that I'll still sort of refer to. And the other thing too was, like, having talked to him about film, at the time when you had DVDs, you had all those audio commentaries. I started like keeping a notebook and just jotting notes just to understand the whole principles of storytelling. Even with Storyboard, working with Jeff, like, he kind of broke down scenes. So, this is going to be this shot and that shot. And you're just learning about how to tell the story visually. Right.
Because then it seems like there's a lot of connection between comics and movies, and especially, like, consider a movie storyboard. I mean, it's like, boy, it's like, do you see that sort of becoming more together these days? Because, I mean, you see all these, like 20 years ago at Comic-Con, suddenly there's movie producers showing up looking to have, ideas for comics. And then, it turns out, well, gee, what a great way to present your future movie idea is to create a comic book and go, hey, look, here it is. Here's the, make this into a movie. Any thoughts on that whole sort of world?
Well, I guess if you want to, if it seemed to me, I mean, even though I worked with people in film, I talking from experience, I never was any of these board meetings at the top brass in terms of Warner Brothers or any of the top echelons. So it seems to me, and I'm just gonna say this off the top of my head, it seems to probably inevitable that we were going to go into the comic book genre. And I'm wondering if the state of the technology of special effects had something to do with it, where you could really pull off visual ideas and concepts with FX and so forth.
Right.
That you probably couldn't have done maybe years ago, even though there was the Batman film with Michael Keaton, the Tim Burton films, or the Christopher Reeve Superman films. But now it seems like it just seems snowballed, where comic books are the hot property for the past, 20 years or so, in the TV market, in the film market. And now the fact that you have like Netflix and Hulu, I mean, it just seems like an endless opportunity to produce and execute comic books into TV or film. And not only that too, but something that I was one time at Society of Illustrators for a live drawing session, and Joe Quesada was doing this a lecture downstairs, and people asked him, how do you break into comics? He said, and I'm paraphrasing this, I think it was like he was encouraging people like, you got so much tools right now at your lab. I'm paraphrasing this, that you could do your own comic book. It's the same thing like music, where it's like, maybe as a band, you were trying to get that label deal, that record deal, but now you could just make an album at home and just put it on YouTube, or put it on fine. Like, it's just, everything's at your disposal now, which is probably a very incredible situation. I don't know if they guarantee about a living, but then again, you never know, So I think in correlate, it doesn't also surprise me that film and comic books are together, because they're both visual mediums, or even television for that matter.
Well, you got like DC and Warner together.
Yeah.
And then Marvel and Disney is sort of like they've put the two together under the same umbrella. And then, there's a lot of video game spin-off. It's sort of like you kind of got this characters and story, and it's kind of being pushed out into different forms. You could read a comic on it, watch a movie, watch a TV show, play a video game, all in this sort of, different ways to enjoy the same sort of characters and world.
Well, it's interesting. I remember when I was at High School of Art and Design, and I wanted to, it was a conflict between creative, because I was into creative writing, and it was creative writing and comics was sort of like the same conflict in the schedule. But I remember talking to this man, his name was Mr. Ferguson. He was the comic art instructor. And I walked in, it was like at the end of the day, and he was on the board, he was just doing something. I said, hi, Mr. Ferguson. I introduced myself, says, how may I help you, whatever. I said, well, I just wanted to ask you, what's your class about? I want to get an idea about your class. And he wasn't looking at me, he was just on the board, he was just writing something. He goes, well, comic book is like jazz. It's an American art form. That's what he said. I remember him saying that. And I think it's something that, again, I don't know, I can't give you the specific historical background about how storytelling started and so forth, but the idea of comic books, of superheroes, New York City, I mean, it started over here, unless I could be wrong, but it's almost like it's a product of America, of like who we are. The same thing like rock and roll music or jazz music. It's sort of like there's something about it, like it's the foundation of our country and so forth. From that just emerges like a lot of ideas and a lot of different storytelling or different genres or different visual aesthetics and so forth. It's an art form that it's so distinctively in itself, unique. It's, the superhero genre, and nowadays, back then it was just, as a kid, you were just reading the comics, and now it's like, God knows, who knows if there's college courses about the art of comics, or, branching into film and so forth. And even though there was, some of that, the science fiction films or like the certain TV shows or cartoons we had as a kid, nothing like compared to today. I think that it's still going to keep going on in the film and movie in the film and TV industry. And now with streaming, it's just, you could put, I'm in the middle of almost finishing up the Zack Snyder Justice League cut, which I really enjoy a lot. And I don't think it's going anywhere at all. I think it's going to be here to stay. And I also think that regarding film, I know that it's been debatable in the film community about, is it valid, or is it, I don't know how to put this. Is it something that stands on its own feet? And I think there should be room for all types of film. And I think it's something you just have to just like, look, it's here to stay, man.
Well,
I tell you.
I know there's been, criticism of like superhero movies. There's some famous guy that was criticizing them.
I think Coppola had said something about,
right.
Or Scorsese, I think, mentioned it. And I will just say they're both great filmmakers. And I had the opportunity to even meet Francis for like a minute. And I can tell you that story later, but I think they're both great filmmakers, both very influential for me. I enjoy their films tremendously.
But you can go back in time and like the Flash Gordon serials,
Oh yeah.
I mean, was that real film? I don't know, but I bet you a lot of people went to watch those movies and paid their money. I mean, it's sort of like, I think
a friend of mine
wide
said,
spectrum of what people, might.
Yeah.
Discover.
Well, a
Like
friend of
rock
mine,
and roll, and then there's classical music.
yeah, yeah. Well, a friend of mine said this about films today, the comic book films. He said they were like, and I'm paraphrasing this, it was like the serials of the 1930s, the 1940s. I mean, there was a certain formula, there was a certain pacing, a beat, a tempo, the cliffhangers, and so forth.
Right.
And so like that's the new, that's the new archetype, and when you watch the films, some of it, it runs the gamut, and you could sort of see it. It definitely has um, certain concepts and certain motifs, and maybe it's repetitive and so forth. And some of it's very unique. And, I guess it's hard for me to say because I grew up with comic books, but also I'll tell you two things. When I was at Art and Design, we had someone in the business come in to speak. I was in a comic book club, and he said to us once, and I guess I could say this has been over 30 years. He said, what's one of the secrets to tell you guys? We're like young kids, we're like 17, 16 at the time. He said, read Dostoevsky. And I think what he was trying to say was like always branch out besides just comic books you're reading and soaking in comic books. Take everything around you and so forth and just put it in. I remember, I think even I was listening to an interview with Guillermo del Toro. I think he was talking about architecture, of how just like looking at architecture and so forth. So I think it's always good to keep yourself open to other forms of art when you're, if you're in comics or in illustration or in film or music.
Right.
One thing seeps into the other and so forth. You
Well,
never.
that sounds like a plus if you can bring in more from other areas into your work.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the other cool thing too, I think with comics now, like with the independent market, and knowing a lot of people that do comic books, either they're working for the top brass or they're doing it on their own. The sky's the limit in terms of stories and ideas and concepts. And I think that's what makes it's the same thing like film. There's not one specific genre of film.
Right.
There's a plethora of genres of film or filmmakers of certain styles. You mentioned Coppola and Scorsese. I think those are the king of the kings, the best of the best. But then you've got people like, besides Orson Welles or like Kurosawa or some of the, the great film noir filmmakers like Earl Walsh or, any of the people of that genre as well, of like films like, White Lightning, Jimmy Cagney from 1949, or John Huston, The Asphalt Jungle, or, a lot of that stuff that even Jim, a lot of conversations would talk about those films with me or with people around and so forth, so it's always good to like, as one of my music professors said at Bard, don't have any schisms, just try to take everything in. That was always the lesson. If it was a music instructor or an art instructor, always take everything in.
Your current work, why don't you kind of go into it for folks as to sort of what you're doing now, and how that, what you could do for them.
Well, right now there seems to be a consistency of clients calling me for commission. I'm actually in the middle of doing a Wonder Woman commission piece. Maybe actually doing 2 Wonder Woman commission pieces. And in terms of the sequential work, I have a lot of my own work, personal work, that I'm just in the beginning, middle stages. But I do get calls from clients that do say, I'm looking for an artist, and I am available to anyone if they want to, looking for an artist or inker to work on sequential work, that I'll be more than looking forward to, excited the project. I have a lot of clients that would send me scripts to them, a lot of great scripts that I would see down the pipeline. I think the one challenge, or the challenges that you have, is that, and this is something that ties in with a lot of things for a lot of people, because I mean, a lot of people in music or film or art or whatever, everyone's hustling. Everyone's trying to get to the next level, next step. And I read a lot of great scripts and ideas, but the one thing that people don't have is a budget. And so that's always a challenge. And for me, it's like, I couldn't really do it for free at this point, or at all, because it's a very challenging. It's a very challenging situation where it's like you have to find like sort of a happy medium with clients. And talking to a lot of clients, I have a lot of clients that say, I love your work. Your work's really amazing. I say, like, look, these are my fees, but if you're an independent publisher, I understand. We could talk, we could figure something out and so forth. And some people respond and some people don't call you back. and that's just the nature of the business, and shouldn't feel bad about it. And you just gotta keep moving on. That's how it goes.
How do you contrast creating your own stuff versus working for someone, a big outfit like DC or Marvel? Or
Well, I've never really worked with DC and Marvel. I did a job for MTV, and so maybe that could help out. That was a job, ironically, there's another job just fell in my lap. I was on vacation up at the Vineyard, checking my emails, get this email, says, "Hi, Rich, this is so-and-so, I'm with MTV. We love your work. We saw it online. Would you be interested in doing a work with us?" And immediately I'm like, yes, yeah, I would, that'd be great. And came back to the city and found out what the job was. And it was for MTV's This Week in News. And what they did was they just sent me a bunch of ideas that they said they wanted to see an illustration for. So like the news flash was, let's say, I think it was cartoons from Nickelodeon was coming back online. There was a story of Beyonce. And there was another one, I don't know if you remember, it was like 5 or 6 years ago, it was a high school kid. He built a clock. He was somewhere like in Dallas, Texas area. And they thought it was a bomb. So the kid was arrested. And I think the kid might have been Muslim.
Yeah, I vaguely recall it, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the whole story, but and so I think it might have played into like ideas of the xenophobia and the other things as well. And so they needed me to film me, just draw these illustrations and cartoons. That was the last one I drew, and I had him. They had there was a picture of him when he was handcuffed as a kid, and I illustrated him, and I had like these huge eyes, like looking at him, with like the stars and stripes in the background. Still like a Steve Ditko motif, but it kind of like try to use these visual ideas to sort of be part of the visual storytelling to deal with the xenophobia or the racial phobia or
right.
That kind of played in, and the kid just
sort of they profiled the kid, I guess.
Yeah, the kid was profiled, right? So I did the work. They filmed me, and they kind of gave me leeway. And I remember the only thing the producer said, "Hey, could you try this? Could you do that?" So for that job, that was never really a problem. But if you do work for publishers, obviously you have to follow. And I'm just speaking off the top of my head. Maybe a certain style. Just depends on what the editor, the art director wants. There might be certain house style that a publisher has or a publishing company has that I'm assuming you would have to follow. Not only that, I'm assuming if you're working with licensed property, it has to look like the licensed property.
Right.
So if you're drawing Spider-Man, got to make sure it looks like Spider-Man. I guess and if the script says establishing shot, long shot, it is Times Square, should look like Times Square.
Right.
That you have to do. The job that I did for Victoria's Secret, the storyboard job with Jeff, he sat down with me and he said, "These are the shots I would like." He gave me all the references, and this is what he wanted. For other jobs, even with like, let's say other clients, I know I'm kind of drifting off here. It's sort of like just submit the thumbnails, you submit your ideas. I explain to clients or art directors. Well, art directors would know this, but clients, these are the samples, the thumbnails. Pick one that you like. Let me know what you think, and then we'll take it from there. But it just depends on the client too.
If all of your work was like a pie, what like how much of the pie is this, and this? Like how much is maybe music or sneakers? Is that a question that's answerable, or?
I think it is. Yeah. To me, I think it's all equal. For some reason, for me, it's hard to say. When I was a kid, growing up, it just seemed like there was, especially in New York City, there was like so much stuff around you. And I was a kid that always gravitated towards the arts. And I think that at one point, you were always like, let's say, beating your head against the wall, doing one thing, let's say. And I think this is where, like, my girlfriend would come in, she says, "Well, why don't you try this? Or why don't you try that?" And, I got into music as well because I really, we had music in the house, and I love rock and roll music, which I think is sort of like the, I don't know if you say maybe the twin of comic books, but just two American art forms that are just
Right.
like very controversial and, got people pissed off. But at the same time, I thought it was just, to me, expressed freedom, or other things. And as a kid, it was like, I want to do this and I want to do that. And I also think too that, I kind of look at it right now at this stage of my life. It's almost like it has to be all part of a whole. Like I have to do all of it. It can't just be just one or the other. And maybe that, I can't, in terms of like when I'm doing the work. I mean, jobs that comes in could be a comic job, it could be a film job, it could be a storyboard job, it could be customized sneakers from a client, or it could be a painting, it could be anything. But to me, it's the, I guess my look, if you were to say like, describe like my vision, it almost would be like everything, including the kitchen sink, or something like it's all one for me. And I just can't. And I think if you look at artists like Jim or even like Frank Frazetta, what I admire about those guys was they didn't do only comic books, but they did like illustrations, like paperback illustrations or posters, or in Jim's case, he worked in film, or Frank worked in film as well with Ralph Bakshi. Like it seemed like doing so much stuff, and I thought, wow, this is so cool that I just couldn't sit still. Like just like it's almost like you do like one thing. I think it also helps you grow, and I think also that as an artist or a musician, like you're always exploring different genres and learning something new. I remember one lesson my guitar teacher gave me. He said, you know, when you're learning music, and I'm going to give you the clean version, what I'm about to tell you, not the well, he said to me, you can't just say, fuck the meat, I'm just going to eat the potatoes. You gotta have it all, you know? And I think with art, it was the same thing. It's like, you know, even with comic art, let's say as an artist, you know, I want to really draw Spider-Man, I want to draw the Hulk, and you work on the pages. You got to know your anatomy. You got to know your perspective. You got to know about storytelling. You got to know about your angle shots. You know, when you have a script, there's a high angle shot. There's the high angle shot work, or there's low angle shot work. The low angle shot, you know, gives the character a dominating feel. The high angle shot, character's vulnerable. In the high angle shot is the character in the center of the frame, left hand corner, the right hand corner. You know, it's just a lot of these ideas that you really need to go in and you just learn on your own. But in conclusion, I think for me, it's like, I think it's in my life right now at this age, I think it's all equally important. And I feel like I have to just keep doing it all. I wish I could sum it up better, but I have it. But I just feel like they're all equal slices.
So for people out there who might want some help from you, what would you say, hey, this is what I can help you with, this is what I'd like to help you with, or this is what you could benefit from in terms of what I've got to offer?
Well, like I said, I'm always interested and available meeting with clients and open for projects and so forth. At the moment, I know, and I say this very respectfully, I know a lot of people out there have projects who say to me, you know, I'm trying to get this made. I'm trying to, you know, get my foot in the door and so forth. You know, at this point, I can't do like any freebies, you know, or something on spec because I think it would just stretch me thin.
Right.
And you wind up doing like 5 projects and well, at the same, but so for me, it's like, if I do have a client on, a lot of the other critiques, I get along with the client, if it's something I also really like and so forth. But at the same time, I'm also very flexible, and I enjoy the creative process. And I think the other thing too is, and I said this with my other job when I worked for Harlem Children's, and I always tell people I'm getting paid to have fun. You know, it should not have to be an experience where it's like it's a grind. You know, it should be something what you really love to do. And it's a very crazy business. I mean, the arts are a crazy business, you know, and also you swim with the sharks. That's something you have to also, you know, be aware of as well. But it's something that I always was very passionate about, that I really love to do. And for anyone in this interview, if you listen to it, like I said, you could always contact me on LinkedIn or Facebook or RICHTEA at Verizon.net. You can always contact me and take it from there. Is
there any direction you're kind of heading now? I mean, are you just kind of in the flow of things, or is there something you might be picking up or heading towards?
In terms of the client work, I mean, it seems like the commission work has been picking up. There are other 2 or 3 clients in the stages of something similar to what we're doing right now with you, where it's just like in the pre-planning stages. One is in the fine arts, the other is in the comic book business, and so forth. So we'll see where that is. Apart from that, also putting a reel together, because I've done music for film and TV, and if anyone does get this, sees this interview, I'm also available for that. So I am putting a reel together of audio and visuals to clients I met at South by Southwest. to see if I could try to also get work in the film and TV of doing like sync music or music licensing and so forth. Because that was something I also did as well. And that was another job, teaching after school. And my supervisor saw my boyfriend does film. He's looking for music. Boom. And that was just the next thing you know, we're at the Tribeca Hotel and I'm watching the film premiere of this movie and I'm hearing my music in a hotel. It was just great, you know. It was a really cool feeling to have. And I think that's like the biggest kick out of doing the stuff that you love to do. It's like you're doing a convention and someone comes up and says, hey, could you draw soup? You know, I remember this one woman, she was like, I had a gift for my kid and he'd like Daredevil versus Kingpin. Great. Sure. Why not? You know, and I knocked it out in a few days after the show. And it was just like, that's the best part of it. It's like when you're just at your studio and you're creating something and it's like, it's not, I mean, you have to make a living and you have to live, you have to survive and you have to be very practical about your finances. But it's great when you're getting paid to do this stuff. I mean,
Sure.
that's a really cool feeling, you know, and that's something I do not have any issues or qualms about.
So you've given out some contact info. I'll get that from you officially and make sure it's part of the
Sure.
YouTube video notes. Is there
Sure.
anything else you'd kind of like to add at this stage?
This is really cool experience. I mean, I would do an interview part 2 or something like that. Part of me was even thinking, I don't know if I should do some visuals or something like that down the road. I never thought about that. I brought my portfolio and so forth. I just didn't know how it would look on Zoom and so forth.
Well,
But
you want to give it a shot. Well, it's or
let's
not.
let's see some of the work I got. I'll show you some stuff. Let's see if this works. And if it doesn't, we could always do
Right,
something.
understood.
Yeah. So here, I'll show you this.
And then your website has your work.
Yeah, if you go on the website, you'll just see like the murals, the illustrations. I got to put in the customized sneakers. I'm actually in the middle of doing stuff, and that's something. It's one of my other goals is starting to put the stuff online to have some sneakers on sale. But I also do commissions for customers as well.
Well, let's give the folks a little bit of a tease as to what it is you can do. And
Sure. So I'll show you this page over here. I'll show you like a regular comic book page.
And this is for what?
This was for a client that was it was for a publisher years ago. It was a story that took place in the 19th century. I think it was like a locust, a swarm of locusts somewhere in the Midwest.
Wow.
And I'll show you this page again, but this was sort of like a storyline where I think the husband comes in. I'm going to show you this shot over here. This was like the last shot I did. It was this really tight close up, and kind of used it for my business card.
I'm not sure gun is going to help. I actually was in a locust thing once when they invade.
Yeah.
It was like unbelievable how,
Yeah, but that was but I always liked that shot. It was just like a low angle close up to give you like that dominating effect. And I kind of liked it so much that I just used it for my business card, just added like that nice red with the white lettering and so forth. And yeah, I'll show you some other stuff. Sorry about that. Hold on a minute. This line works like my own original artwork, something I've just been working on and so forth. And so you sort of like get an idea. And this is digital art. A different style. And that was actually, it was almost like a sort of like a card I made for my cousin. It's like she graduated from high school. I thought, that kind of looks cool. Just redigitize it. I just want to put it in my portfolio and so forth. Whoops, sorry. Stuff just fell.
Yeah, I saw some of your digital artwork. Is that sort of like taking off or replacing sort of, hand to created art? Or I don't know.
I don't know if all the publishers are going digital. I mean, it seems a lot of it's heading that way and so forth. And I work in Adobe Sketch. I work in Photoshop, Illustrator, Clip Art, a lot of these Procreate, all these programs. I mean, I'm enjoying it. And it's almost like learning a new art tool, this tool of trade. But in doing the commission work that I'm doing now, I'm still doing all by hand. And there's something really, really unique about it as well when you're combining gouache and acrylics and sort of like Dr. Phil Martin, sort of watercolor and so forth, and creating all these different textures. I would say at this point, in terms of the illustration, there's a lot of it's digital, from what I've been doing recently. And for a lot of the ads that I see, because when I'm applying for work, it's about knowing a lot of these programs, Storyboard, oh my God, Storyboard Pro 7, or trying to really know about the Adobe programs and so forth. One job I did for Harlem Children's Zone, the Healthy Harlem Initiative. I just remember knocking it out in pencils and inks, and then we just did everything was formatted into Illustrator and Photoshop. It was all digital in the very end. So the traditional style of like illustration stuff of like the great pulp artists and so forth, there's probably still a market out there, I'm assuming, and so forth. But for the most part, at this point, a lot of the commission work I'm doing of clients is by hand. And for the other work, for the research work, some of the stuff I did for the Harlem Children's, some of it was digital, some of it was by hand, some of it was a combination of the both.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, Rich, it's been an interesting interview. I really enjoyed it. This is my first shot at what I hope might be many such interviews with people. Maybe a follow-up with yourself as well.
I'll be up for a follow-up. I'll be interesting. I mean, because I don't know if it's any awkward showing the artwork and stuff, or stuff is kind of like off the cuff. So I don't know if there's,
we could
maybe
probably figure out a more sophisticated way to do that.
Yeah, but it's really cool.
But this will be, now people will be able to see all this on your website though, and so then they can follow up with you personally if they want to, do business with you or have inquiries about doing business. And we'll have all that contact info on the YouTube notes. But why don't you we'll wrap here real quick. But one more time, just give all the contact info that you want to give, and nice and slow for everybody, and then we'll call it a wrap for now.
No problem. So yeah, my name is Rich Terdoslavich. It's capital TERDOSLAVICH. And my email address is richt@verizon.net. That's lowercase RICHTEA @verizon.net. You could follow me on Instagram at AceMod1, ACEMOD1, the number, AceMod1. I'm on Facebook, Rich Terdoslavich, LinkedIn, Rich Terdoslavich, Twitter at ModSoul, @MODSOUL. And my website address would be richterdoslavich.modrockandroll.com. That's long title, so I'll be happy to put that information on. But I'm assuming if you Google, you type in the name Rich Terdoslavich, it should be popping up. And I don't know if my number is 917-848-0941. And looking forward to hearing from anybody out there in the world of social media entertainment. You need the arts, the music. I'm here and I'm available.
All right, fantastic, Rich. Okay,
thanks.
That's a wrap. And
sounds good.
And I will hit the button one more time, and then we'll finish this.
No problem. And I just want to say thanks for this. This is really great. It was just kind of cool when you connected me on LinkedIn. I was like, what do you do? And he said, well, I do this, I do that. I said, well, would you be interested? I'm like, yeah, I guess so. Sure, why not? So this was kind of cool. It's really awesome.
Very cool. Okay, let me hit.
I'll be up for another one.
Excellent. Let me hit the stop recording and talk to you.
Yeah, I guess you can.